The spark that lit the fire. The message arrived on a Tuesday. It came through official diplomatic channels, transmitted in 17 different languages across human space, as casual as a weather report. The crystalline beings known as the Vorthak Empire had sent what they considered a routine administrative notice. During resource extraction operations in Sector 7 Alpha, one juvenile specimen of species 4412b was terminated. Standard compensation of 300 energy credits has been transferred to your governing body. Mining operations will continue as scheduled. Species 4412b. That was what they called humans. Commander Elena Vasquez stood frozen in the command center of Mars Station 7, her coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips. Around her, dozens of officers and technicians had stopped mid-task, their faces reflecting the same horrified disbelief. The holographic display continued scrolling through the message, adding details about mineral yields and extraction quotas, as if a child's death was merely a footnote in their quarterly report. "Commander," Lieutenant Torres whispered, his voice cracking. "They're talking about the New Haven colony. That's where the Chens relocated last year." Elena set down her mug with deliberate care, though her hands trembled. She knew the Chens. She'd attended their farewell party when they'd left Earth, excited about their new life on humanity's furthest colony world. Their son Tommy had been 7 years old, a bright-eyed boy who'd spent the entire party asking everyone about their favorite constellations. 300 energy credits. That's what the Vorthak thought a human child was worth. The Vorthak were an ancient race, beings of living crystal who had achieved spaceflight when humanity's ancestors were still learning to control fire. Their empire spanned 1,000 systems, their technology so advanced that most species simply accepted their dominance as natural law. They communicated through harmonics that could shatter glass from a light year away, and their ships moved through space like light through a prism. To them, younger races were barely distinguishable from the resources they extracted from planets they had never bothered to understand what they were dealing with when they classified humanity in the gleaming council chambers of Vorthak Prime. Supreme Harmonic Zix Theta reviewed the resource reports with satisfaction. The new mining operation was exceeding projections. The termination of the small organic had been unfortunate but necessary. It had wandered into the extraction zone, and their equipment couldn't stop the automated sequence once initiated. These things happened. They'd followed protocol, sent notification, transferred compensation. The matter was closed. Zix Theta's crystalline form hummed with contentment. The lesser species always accepted the compensation. Some grumbled, but none had ever done more than file formal complaints through the Galactic Council. What could they do against the might of the Vorthak Empire? The Supreme Harmonic would learn the answer to that question soon enough. On Earth, President Sarah Mitchell stood before the United Nations Assembly, her face carved from stone. Behind her, a holographic image of Tommy Chen smiled eternally, caught mid-laugh at his 7th birthday party just 2 months ago. He was wearing a cape made from a bedsheet, pretending to be a superhero. "They call it an accident," Mitchell said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent chamber. "They call it standard protocol. They sent us 300 energy credits as if that could somehow balance the loss of this child's infinite potential." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "The Vorthak have made a calculation. They believe we are weak. They believe we will accept this loss as we have accepted their dominance of local space. They believe we will grieve quietly and move on." Her voice hardened. "They have calculated wrong." The assembly erupted, not in chaos but in unified purpose. Representatives from every nation, every colony, every space station stood as one. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, the species acted with singular intent. War Elena received her orders within the hour. Every human military asset was being recalled, reorganized, repurposed. The industrial might of 3 worlds and 17 space stations pivoted from construction to destruction. Ships designed for exploration were retrofitted with weapons. Mining vessels became battleships. Even civilian craft volunteered for service. But more than ships and weapons, humanity brought something the Vorthak had never calculated into their equations. Rage. Not the hot, unthinking rage of a moment, but the cold, purposeful fury of a species that had been pushed past its breaking point. Every human knew what it meant to lose a child. Even those without children of their own understood the sacred nature of protecting the young. It was written into their DNA, carved into their souls by millions of years of evolution. The Vorthak had violated the most fundamental law of human existence. The mobilization was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed. The Vorthak had expected protests, perhaps some trade sanctions. They did not expect the entire human industrial base to convert to war production in 72 hours. They did not expect civilians to volunteer by the millions, offering everything from their personal savings to their own bodies for military service. They did not expect the humans to reverse engineer Vorthak technology from captured mining equipment, improving upon designs that had remained unchanged for millennia. Most of all, they did not expect the humans to be ready to die for a single child they'd never met. Admiral Chen Wei, Tommy's uncle, took command of the assembled fleet. His assignment had been a coincidence of timing, but no one questioned the poetry of it. When he spoke to the fleet before departure, his words were broadcast across human space. "They think we're just another species to be cataloged and controlled," he said quietly. "They think our grief is just another resource to be managed. Today we teach them otherwise. Today we show them that humans do not forget. We do not forgive the murder of our children. And we absolutely, without exception, do not stop." The fleet departed Earth's orbit in perfect formation, 300 ships carrying humanity's answer to the Vorthak Empire. They jumped to hyperspace as one, leaving behind contrails of light that spelled out a simple message for any who cared to observe. For Tommy, in her quarters aboard the flagship Retribution, Elena studied the tactical displays. The Vorthak had superior technology, superior numbers, superior position. By every metric that mattered, humanity should lose this war within days. But Elena had studied history. She knew that humans had a particular talent that no amount of technology could overcome. Humans were exceptionally good at doing the impossible when they were angry enough. As the fleet hurtled through hyperspace toward Vorthak territory, word spread through the galaxy. The younger races watched in amazement. The older ones, those who remembered their own rises to power, watched with something approaching respect. And some, a precious few who had suffered under Vorthak dominance for centuries, began to hope. The Vorthak Empire received humanity's formal declaration of war with confusion. No species had declared war on them in over 3,000 years. Zix Theta consulted with the high harmonics, their crystalline forms resonating with bewilderment. Surely this was some translation error. Surely the humans didn't actually intend to attack the most powerful empire in the known galaxy over a single juvenile. They sent a response, offering to increase the compensation to 10,000 energy credits. Humanity's response was to destroy 3 Vorthak mining stations in synchronized attacks across 3 different systems, all at exactly the same moment. The message was clear. This was not about compensation. This was about justice. The galaxy held its breath as David faced Goliath, and for the first time in millennia, Goliath felt something it had forgotten existed: fear. When giants awakened, the Vorthak had conquered through mathematics. Every expansion, every subjugation, every resource extraction had been calculated to the finest decimal point. Their crystalline minds processed probability matrices that predicted outcomes centuries in advance. They had run the calculations on humanity's military response 17 different ways. All 17 predicted humanity's defeat within 10 standard days. What their calculations hadn't accounted for was that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history beating the odds. The first battle took place at Kepler Station, a Vorthak refueling depot that had stood unchanged for 7 centuries. The defending fleet commander, Harmonic Vex Prime, watched the approaching human ships with what passed for amusement among his kind. 30 human vessels against his 100. The odds were so laughably skewed that he didn't even bother to wake his reserve fighters. Admiral Chen Wei studied the Vorthak formation through the tactical display. They were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, their positions calculated for maximum efficiency. Beautiful, predictable, fatal. "All ships," Chen commanded, his voice steady despite the pain that had lived in his chest since learning of Tommy's death. "Execute Chaos Protocol." The human fleet shattered like a fist opening into fingers, each ship careening off in seemingly random directions. Some accelerated beyond safe limits, others cut engines entirely, drifting like debris. 2 collided with each other in what appeared to be a catastrophic accident. The Vorthak computers immediately began recalculating, trying to find the pattern in the madness. There was no pattern. That was the point. Humans had learned long ago that the best way to fight a superior calculator was to be incalculable. As the Vorthak system struggled to predict trajectories that changed every 2 seconds, human pilots relied on something their crystalline enemies couldn't quantify: instinct. The battle lasted 43 minutes. When the last Vorthak ship shattered into prismatic fragments, Kepler Station was in human hands. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The impossible had happened. But Chen Wei wasn't celebrating. He stood on the bridge looking at the casualty reports. 18 ships lost, 3,000 humans dead. Each name was another weight on his soul, but he carried them willingly. They had chosen to be here. Tommy hadn't chosen to die. The Vorthak High Command convened an emergency session. Their harmonic frequencies reached pitches that hadn't been used since their last existential threat, 3 millennia ago. Supreme harmonic Zix Theta's form flickered with agitation as reports came in from across the Empire. Human ships were appearing everywhere, striking without pattern, without warning, without mercy. But there was more to humanity's strategy than chaos. While the military drew Vorthak attention, human infiltration specialists were conducting a different kind of warfare. They broadcast on every frequency in every language to every species under Vorthak rule. The broadcasts were simple. They told Tommy's story. They told of a 7-year-old boy who loved the stars, who had drawn pictures of alien friends he hoped to meet someday, who had learned to say hello in 47 different languages because he wanted everyone to feel welcome, who had been killed while picking flowers for his mother on what should have been an ordinary Thursday afternoon. The broadcast spread like wildfire through the galaxy's communication networks. Species that had accepted Vorthak dominance for generations suddenly questioned why. The death of a child, a universal tragedy that transcended species, became a rallying cry. On Vorthak Prime, Zix Theta received reports of uprisings on 17 conquered worlds. Species that had been pacified for centuries were suddenly refusing to work in Vorthak facilities. Trade routes were disrupted. Supply chains collapsed. The perfect order of the Empire was crumbling, all because of one human child. How? Zix Theta harmonized to his advisors. How can one juvenile cause such disruption? The answer came from an unexpected source. Harmonic Kim Delta, ancient even by Vorthak standards, resonated with something resembling sadness. Because we forgot. Kim Delta sang in frequencies that spoke of ages past. We forgot what it means to feel. We forgot that some things cannot be calculated, cannot be compensated, cannot be replaced. We forgot that for some species, their young are not resources to be tallied but pieces of their future, fragments of their souls. The human fleet pressed deeper into Vorthak space. Each battle was a lesson in controlled chaos, in the power of unpredictability. Elena Vasquez led a strike team that disabled a Vorthak dreadnought by broadcasting Tommy's favorite song, a silly children's tune about a spaceship made of cheese, on the same frequency as their navigation systems. The harmonic interference was so unexpected, so absurd, that the Vorthak system simply couldn't process it. But the masterstroke came when humanity revealed their true objective. They weren't trying to conquer Vorthak space. They weren't seeking resources or territory. They wanted something far more devastating to the crystalline empire. They wanted the Vorthak to feel. Every human ship carried transmitters that had been modified using reverse-engineered Vorthak technology. When activated simultaneously, they created a harmonic resonance that penetrated the crystalline structure of every Vorthak in range. But instead of carrying data or commands, these harmonics carried something the Vorthak had never experienced: human emotion. In an instant, every Vorthak within a dozen light-years felt what Chen Wei felt when he learned of his nephew's death. They felt Elena's rage. They felt the grief of Tommy's parents. They felt the collective sorrow and fury of the entire human species. For beings who had existed for millennia in a state of pure logic, the experience was overwhelming. Zix Theta's form cracked, hairline fractures spreading across his crystalline body as foreign feelings flooded through him. Love, loss, rage, hope, despair, determination, all at once, all-consuming. The Vorthak fleet, poised to crush the human forces with overwhelming numbers, simply stopped. Thousands of crystalline beings floated in space, paralyzed not by weapons but by the weight of understanding what they had done. The surrender came within hours, not because humanity had defeated them militarily, The Vorthak still possessed the power to destroy every human ship. They surrendered because they finally understood what they had taken. Through human eyes, they saw Tommy not as Species 4412B Juvenile Unit 1, but as a child who would never grow up, never fulfill his dreams, never make his parents proud. The treaty was signed on New Haven, in the field where Tommy had died. Admiral Chen Wei stood beside the massive crystalline form of Zix Theta, who had come personally to offer not compensation, but something the Vorthak had never offered before, an apology. "We did not know," Zix Theta harmonized, his frequencies now touched with something new, regret. "We did not understand. Your species is young, but you possess something we lost long ago. You feel, you love, you protect your young with a fervor we had forgotten existed." Humanity's terms were not what the galaxy expected. They didn't demand resources or territory. They demanded that the Vorthak establish a memorial on every world in their empire, each one telling the story of Tommy Chen and the war that followed. They demanded that the Vorthak learn to see other species not as resources, but as beings with their own worth. Most surprisingly, they offered to teach the Vorthak how to feel again, how to reconnect with the emotions they had abandoned in their pursuit of perfect logic. As the human fleet prepared to return home, Elena stood in that field on New Haven, looking at the small memorial that marked where Tommy had died. The Vorthak had offered to build something grand, a crystalline monument that would stand for millennia. The humans had refused. Instead, there was a simple stone marker with Tommy's picture and the inscription, "Here lies Tommy Chen, age 7, who changed the galaxy." The war was over. Humanity had lost 3,000 soldiers but gained something invaluable, the respect of every species in known space. The message was clear. Humans might be young, might be small, might be technologically inferior, but they would never, ever allow their children to be harmed without consequence. As Elena placed a small bouquet of flowers, the same kind Tommy had been picking that day, on the memorial, she whispered, "We came for you, Tommy, just like we promised. The galaxy would never be the same."